them, just imagine what power lies there, what potential lies there. And that's why this is where this is important here. So as we think about it, I want to do a small exercise with you guys here. I want you to stop here for a second and reflect. Who is a person who has impacted your life the most? Think about it for a second. Who is the person who has impacted your life the most so far? And if you have a piece of paper and pen in front of you, just write it down. Just write down the name of that person. I wonder how many of us have written the name of a person who was our boss just because he was our boss. You might have had a boss. I'm not saying no, but in my experience, every time I've done this seminar, I have at least 75% of the people who write names of those who don't necessarily have influence, have position over them. They'll be either their friends or their siblings or their parents or their teachers or someone who doesn't necessarily have that kind of influence over them, or that not influence, that kind of position over them, right? So which clearly tells me today that if you think about the person whose name you have written, did you necessarily have, did that person necessarily have a position without which he or she could not have influenced you? So that's just a small reflection for us to see. Leadership is not about position. Position does not make a leader, but the leader makes the position. Okay, so I want you to meet an influencer here. Anybody recognizes this influencer? He's a great influencer. Anybody recognizes this guy? No? Okay, I'll tell you who he is. He's actually my son. If you didn't recognize him, I don't hold it against you because you've never seen him, right? But I'll tell you why I have put his slide over here. He's only 13 and he has learned the art of influencing. I don't know from whom, but he does a great job. So I was talking about something before we started about my pet, and you probably heard a bird chirp behind, and that was a compromise because he wanted a dog. So my son, he said, I want a dog. And I was like, no. And I, first of all, need to apologize to all of you dog lovers. Nothing against dogs as such, but I just don't do very well with dogs. So I was like, no. The dogs don't come here in this house. Either I'm here or the dogs are here. And at one point he even said, yeah, then let's have the dog. But besides that, here's what he did to influence me. He comes to me and he says, Dad, what are the 5 things that you want me to do that I'm not doing? And this has got nothing to do with dogs, right? So he comes out of the blue. He's asking me, what are the 5 things you want me to do that I'm not doing today? So I went, okay, you need to exercise. You need to be disciplined. You need to learn to do some chores, blah, blah, blah. I told him 5 things. He's like, okay, he writes it down. I'm wondering what's going on in his mind. Then he comes to me after a day or so and he tells me, Dad, I also want to know, give me top 5 reasons why you would not like a dog. So I was like, okay, my top 5 reasons are, it's messy everywhere. I don't have the time to clean, and I know you won't, so I don't have the time to clean. I don't have this. And I gave him some 5 reasons, and I don't even remember what I told him. I just made it up that time. He was like, okay. And he walks off. After some time, I get an email from him with a PowerPoint of 50 slides attached. The first part of the PowerPoint is 5 myths of owning a dog busted. 5 myths of owning a dog busted. And I'm like, whoa, can you imagine? And all those 5 things which he mentioned were the 5 things which I told him. And the second part of it was, how do dogs help people become more disciplined, become more, all those 5 things. That's why I call him a great influencer. I was laughing and I was really impressed with this. And don't tell him, and I hope he's not listening here, I almost had a desire to get him a Yorkie. I said, maybe a Yorkie will be fine. I almost wanted to get him a dog. So how did he do this? What did he do to influence me here? there was a few things which he tried, and he actually climbed the influence ladder. I'm going to talk about the influence ladder. He climbed the influence ladder one step at a time, trying to get me to do this. But at the end of the day, the only way he can get it is when he reaches the last ladder, the rung of the ladder. So let's look at the influence ladder. So first was force. It was like, Dad, you need to get it to me. If you don't get it to me, I'm not going to stay in this house, or you're not going to be here. All kinds of drama here. I don't know if you have seen that in your life, but I have seen it when I used to work for a company earlier. When they did not get, it was a unionized environment. So when they did not get their bonus checks, they literally brought hockey sticks and all, and they broke everything, demanding the management should give them bonuses. So it was really fearful and crazy. But that's what is trying to influence, trying to make people do something by force. Not a good place to be. You don't want to be that influencer. The second step, and to be very honest, I don't know if I should be calling intimidation as the first one, because that's scary to me. But intimidation is more the way it differentiates from being using force is simply this: when it's intimidating a person, you're threatening a person. If you don't do this, I'm going to do it. So in force, you're actually carrying it out. In intimidation, you're like, if you don't do this, I'm going to do this to you. I went through that in my personal life also, or in my professional life rather, when I joined a company, and it was my third or fourth day of the company, and my payroll person comes in and hands me a PTO. I want to take a day off, and it's like, okay. And I start talking to people around me, and I said, she's in payroll, and she's the only one in payroll. Would we be okay if she takes a day off? Or she had, I think, 2 or 3 days off. I was told, no, there's a new process which is coming up. We need her on this day. So I go back to her and say, hey, can you do something about this? Can you carry your laptop home, maybe work from home for a couple of hours or do something? She said, okay, let me think about it. She goes out, she comes back after some time and hands me her resignation and says, if you don't let me go, I'm going to resign. That was intimidation. And I was only 4 days in the company. I took a decision to let her go. I said, okay, you can go. And a long story short, she went. I did not give into that. But that's intimidation, trying to get people to do stuff by threatening them. Not a good place to be. Manipulation. We know about this, right? People manipulate and say, remember I did this for you last year? You better help me here now, right? So kind of manipulating people to get them to do your bidding. That's not what we are talking about when we talk about influence. The other is positional. Again, positional is, if you have children, you know this very well. I say this to my two children, two boys all the time. I will tell them to do something, and then when they ask why, I say, because I said so. And probably you have heard your parents say that to you, because I said so. That's positional. Doesn't last long, right? Once they are 18, the kids are 18, you can't tell them because I said so. So that doesn't help. You have to go further up. Exchange. Can you think of exchanges like, if you do this for me, I will do this for you? It's kind of a barter exchange. Again, not as bad as force or intimidation, but again, that's not the best way. Why? Because once the other person doesn't need anything from you, or you don't need anything from the other person, there is no influence. The other guy doesn't do anything, right? So again, not a best place to be. Persuasion. This is the classic, the dog example, which I gave you, which my son did with me, trying to persuade me by 50 slides saying, here is why you should be, like a great salesman. And I'm like, that's great. Fortunately for me, I have studied this, so I know what you're trying to do to me here. And he didn't get a dog still, as you know. You don't hear any barking here, right? However, the last rung of the ladder, where you really want to be, is respect. People follow you not because they have to, but because they want to. One of my mentors had told me once this: the The day people come to you for advice in your workplace is the day you know you're making a difference in their lives and they respect you. Even if they're not connected with you exactly in your work, but if they come to you and ask you stuff, that means you're on the right track. They know, then you know that it is great, it is good, it's right. So that's where we are trying to be today. So where do we start? I want to take a pause here, and because I can't see any of your your messages out here. So in case you have anything, you'll have to just speak up. When I'm on this, I can't see. When I'm doing the PowerPoint, I cannot see your chats. So just remember that if you have anything, just unmute yourself, stop me, and ask the questions. Okay. So where do I start? How do I start? How do I start influencing? And I don't know who said this, but somebody said this when I asked about leadership earlier from you. It starts with you. This is a question which will make you go, ouch. Would you be willing to follow you? Think about it. Having known everything about yourself, having known your mind, the way you think, what you do, the manipulation sometimes I might be doing, not you, me, okay. Would I still be willing to follow me? And the point is simply this. If I am not going to be willing to follow myself, why should anybody else follow me? Right? If I cannot follow myself, then nobody else needs to follow me. Nobody else has to have that confidence in me to follow me. People want the perks of leadership, but they don't want to pay the price. People want others to follow, but they don't want to do it themselves. And I think it was John Maxwell who said, don't tell people to do anything that you yourself would never do. So if you're not going to be willing to follow yourself, if you're not going to be willing to do what you want to do, if you were two different people and you knew everything about yourself, as you know, would you follow yourself? If not, there is some serious thinking that you need to do and say, what do I need to change in this? Because if I want to be a great leader, I need to learn self-leadership first. Okay, so that's really important. Self-leadership is the most important thing here. All right, so having led yourself first, we'll go to influence. And the way we do it is, I'm just going to run through this here so you can have the whole thing. Here's what we're going to do. In the next whatever couple of hours we have, we are going to go through influencer, which is kind of an acronym which was created by John Maxwell. And every letter of the word here is going to talk about a way we can influence people. When we do things like these, as you see on your screen, that's how you start influencing people. So we are going to start with the first, integrity with people. I stands for integrity with people in the acronym influencer. And then we go on to nurturing people, faith in people, listening to the people, understanding people, enlarging, navigating, connecting, empowering, and the last one, the most important one, reproducing other leaders, right? So some of this we'll spend a little more time than the others because I feel they are more important in the sense of they are the basic fundamentals. For example, you may be wanting to nurture people, have faith in people and everything, but if you lack integrity, nothing works. It doesn't work at all, right? So before we get started here, anybody has any questions so far? Unmute yourself, ask. Okay, seems like we're all doing good so far then, unless you guys have already left me here. I hope not. Okay, integrity. The first and the most basic foundation for influencing anybody is to have integrity with people, okay? Integrity is the values that you hold, right? Which you don't want to compromise on. So here's how I put it. You should know your negotiables. You should know your non-negotiables. And whatever you decide are your non-negotiables are your values. And as a good influential leader, You want to make sure that you do not compromise on your integrity. You do not compromise on those values, right? Because there are some things, yeah, you might have to change some things, you have to be flexible, but there are some things which you would say, heck no, whatever happens, this is this is not moving. And it's good to be stubborn and rigid about those things. Okay, once you have those values. Elvis Presley, you all guys know who Elvis Presley was, right? Elvis Presley once said, values are like fingerprints. Nobody's are the same, but you leave them all over everything you do. You heard that? Values are like fingerprints. Everybody's are different, right? Everybody has different fingerprints, but you leave them all over the place, over everything you do. And that's what integrity calls us to do. We leave our mark, we leave our values everywhere, everything we do. Okay, so integrity with people is one of the key foundation for you to influence somebody. And here is why. As we talked about, leadership is influence, right? And you cannot influence somebody unless you have integrity, right? So we'll walk from integrity to leadership, and I'll show you the connection, how integrity and leadership are so closely connected. Okay, so probably a number of you were not even born about the example I'm going to give you. In 1982, most of you were probably not born, or some of you are not born, but this is a classic example. And maybe in one of your SMU classes, you might have this as a case study. So then you can remember me again. Okay, so I call it walk the talk. This is an example of what happened in 1982. Okay, and before I go there, I'll ask a simple question. If you have headache or fever, what's the first medication that you take? I think it's going to be Tylenol for most of us. I go for Tylenol. But this is what happened in 1982 with Tylenol. In Chicago, there was somebody had tampered their medication, the tablets that they were having, extra strong, extra strength Tylenols. They opened it up and replaced it with cyanide. 7 people died in Chicago in one day, and there was a big hue and cry. Nobody wanted to get any Tylenol anywhere, and there was a big issue out there. And as all these things were going on, one of the things which the CEO of Tylenol did at that time was he started giving in print advertisements and TV advertisements. In 1982, there was no much of internet, not at all actually. So it was more of TV advertisements where he came up front and said, do not take any Tylenol. Now, the problem that was there was not, it did not happen in their factory or in their premises. Some other CEOs would have probably said, I don't know, it's not my problem. It left my factory well and good. If somebody has done something on the way, it's not my problem, and would have fought back. But the CEO of Tylenol at that time, he said, no, it's my responsibility. So at that time, Tylenol had about 32% of the market share. And they were among the top companies at that time. All of a sudden, they came down, crashing down, $100 million loss. $100 million lost in those days because of this Tylenol issue. Fast forward 2020, we still trust Tylenol, we still take Tylenol. Why? Because the CEO at that time decided to show integrity. He did not try to come up with excuses, what I call as blame storming. You've heard of brainstorming? This is blame storming. Blaming, who should I blame? If something has gone wrong, who should I blame? He didn't do that. He came up front and he said, whatever it is, even if I've lost my market share, even if they lost $100 million in a day, it's okay. I am not going to let people die on this. And he came forward, and because he showed that integrity, the trust was built up. And once again, Tylenol was one of the top selling brands again. You need to walk the talk. That's integrity. So somebody asked him, asked the CEO, how could you take this decision so easy? And he said, I could take that decision because I used to practice and we used to talk about it and we practice it every single day. Even before it happened, we were already practicing about it. So you see, it's very important to walk the talk. And there are a few things I want to talk to you about integrity. Integrity does not come with a price tag. You know, we always used to joke before I learned this lesson, everybody has a price. Some have $10, some have $10 billion, but everybody has a price. But truly speaking, integrity does not come with a price tag. In fact, George Washington says, few men have the virtue to stand the highest bidder. Okay, so some might have a virtue of $10. No, I'm not going to take the $10. But if you were to offer me 10 million, I might think about it. Few men have the ability to stand, have the virtue to stand against the highest bidder. But that's what it calls us. When we talk about integrity, it tells us about having that virtue to stand. And as I said earlier, there are some non-negotiables. There are some things I don't do. In fact, I left a job when I was in a job when I did not like it, because I was asked to go bribe the government. I was like, no, I'm not doing this. That was the hardest time for me because I was I was not making money at that time. I was very new in my career, but there was one thing which I had already learned. Integrity does not come with a price tag. The second thing is integrity is preconceived and pre-decided. Zig Ziglar says this, when you do the things you have to do, when you have to do them, the day will come when you can do the things you want to do, when you want to do them. Okay? When you do the things you have to do when you have to do them, the day will come when you can do the things you want to do when you want to do them. Okay? So basically what he is saying is really, you have to be preconceived and pre-decided about it. You have to think about it and do things prior to even the situation coming up. When you're pre-decided, you're preconceived. When the time comes, you can do exactly what you know you want to do. You don't have to think about it, right? So that's what integrity is about. The third thing is, as I said earlier, it requires practice. In fact, a philosopher, William James, says this: everybody, excuse me, everybody ought to do at least two things every day that they do not like, just for practice. Everybody ought to do at least two things every day that they do not like, just for practice. Integrity is same way, just for practice. It requires practice. That is why when I worked for a multinational Fortune 50 company, we used to spend time and money and effort in just helping people, giving them situations and saying, what will you do if this thing comes up? And we were being trained and trained and trained to know what to do when the time comes, right? And the last thing which I want to talk about here is it's the small foxes that can destroy the vineyard. Usually, it's not the big things that cause a problem. I can be pretty certain. I know there are more than 100 people on this call. I can be reasonably confident that there is nobody who has gone out of the hundreds of us here on this session. Nobody has gone and looted a bank. I know that. I can be almost certain. But it's not the big things that decide this, right? It's the small things. That's why John Maxwell says, major in minor things. Okay, it's important to major in minor things. It's the small things that make or break us, and you need to start with those small things. Honesty is a habit that you need to start developing. So integrity comes because of practice. It comes because you are focused not on the big things all the time, because I know for sure not many of us would want to go rob a bank, or not many of us would want to go do something really bad. But I wonder if there are any of us here who think it's okay to go get a writing pad from the company. It starts with small things, right? So that's where our integrity is built. And again, integrity is not determined by circumstances. It's not because I'm rich, because I have everything, I'm okay, I'm having integrity. No, no, no. It's irrespective of your circumstances. In fact, there was a Harvard survey that happened many years back, and all the CEOs, top CEOs of within US were asked to do a survey, and they were asked one question: what is the one quality that you want from your people who report to you? And 71% of the CEOs responded by saying integrity. They were not looking for great minds. They were not looking for strategies. They were looking for integrity. And I believe that's true. That's really true. That's what really sets apart leaders who are servant leaders, who are great leaders. Okay. It's not based on credentials. Just because I am the CEO of the company doesn't mean I'm having integrity. Integrity starts first, and then people get that positions, as we talked about. And we need to distinguish between reputation and integrity. Reputation is what people think you are. Okay, reputation is what people think you are. Integrity is who you really are. So that's the difference. You need to know integrity is not reputation. Because reputation is what? What is reputation? What people think who you are. Integrity is who you really are. Okay. Okay. There's another example I want to give you, and I think by this time a lot of you were already born. 2010. So in April 2010, if you, and you probably don't remember this or you don't know this, but there was an oil leakage in the Gulf of Mexico. About 5 million barrels of oil leaked in 9 days or so. That time, their CEO, Tony Howard, was asked this question. There was a big hue and cry because all the flora and the fauna was dead, and people lost their jobs and they could not carry out their occupation. It was a mess in 2010. So Tony Howard, the CEO, was asked this: so what happened, and what do you think? And this was his response. His response was simply this: well, the 5 million barrels of oil which leaked in was very tiny compared to the large ocean. The oil that leaked in was tiny compared to the large ocean. Guess what happened? There was a bigger hue and cry. People just started getting even more upset with all this. And there was such a big backlash on him. He called for another press conference and he said, okay, let's fix this. And as they were talking to him, he said, yep, I agree. There was a big impact on the people and also on me. I want my life back. Not a good statement to make. Within 2 months, he lost his job and he was done. And do you know what? This company is through which this leakage happened is called BP, British Petroleum. They had just merged with another American company, and British Petroleum became BP. The American journalists and the media, they refused to call this company as BP. They called them as British Petroleum. They had nothing to do with this. Americans had nothing to do with this. It's a British company. They had such bad press. Even after 10 years today, they're in trouble. They're still facing all the trouble. They're still going through all these because of what happened in 2010. And they were among the top four companies, oil companies, they were number 2. Now they're number 4, 4 out of 4, if it makes them feel any better. They lost almost $100 billion was the cost of this one statement, which was made so neglectfully, very negligent. So what does that teach us? It tells us this: if you see the two examples, one of Tylenol and on the other hand of British Petroleum, you will see the difference in the two CEOs and their responses, right? So as we talked about, we need to have integrity. integrity is built when there is credibility, right? So there is credibility. You have to have credibility. So if you have integrity, you will, and when you start doing things with integrity, you will gain credibility. Let's put it this way. I don't think I said it right for the first time. So when you start acting with integrity, you will start gaining credibility. And now we're going to see, how do we gain that credibility? So we're trying to come from integrity to leadership. That's our journey here. Okay. So if you have integrity, you gain credibility. When you have credibility, there will be something which we'll talk about. But before that, an example of my life again here, my professional life. This was very early, pretty early in my career, not very early, but pretty early in my career, when I was applying for a job as a controls manager in Texas here. And I was very well prepared for my interview. I had gone through everything. I kind of memorized everything I have to say. So I'm here sitting here with a service manager who was interviewing me. And as I kept telling him what I'm going to do, he just gave me that look, exactly what you see, that cat look. Yeah, he gave me a nasty look and he said, I'm not listening to you. I'm going to be watching your feet, not your mouth. I'm watching your feet, not your mouth. Okay. What was he saying is, I want to see if you have credibility in what you are saying. And it just took me by surprise. Fortunately, I got the job and I got a chance to prove it to him that, yeah, I'm a good guy. But the point is simply this: people are watching. Okay. How we act with integrity. And when we act with integrity, we gain credibility. And remember, I told you some time back that the best way for you to know if you are doing a good job is when people come to you at your job and ask you for advice. This same service manager came to me tons of time in the next 2 years that I worked there for advice. Look, somebody is watching you, okay? People are watching you. They're watching how you act with integrity. People are watching your feet, not your mouth, as he said. He's one of my best friends even today after almost 12 years now, almost 12 years back. I worked with him. He's still a great friend of mine. So that's what happens when we are there. So as we walk towards this, as we go from integrity and we've established our credibility, we realize this is how we can build upon this and be influential leaders. So how do you gain credibility? Simple. Say what you do and do what you say. Okay. Arthur Gordon has said this: nothing is easier than saying words, and nothing is harder than living by them day after day. So Gordon says this: nothing is easier than saying something, but nothing is harder than living them day after day. Say what you do and do what you say, and you'll have credibility, right? You might have heard of this before, but that's exactly how it is with our children sometimes, right? If I don't punish them, if I tell them I'm going to punish you, I'm going to discipline, not punish, discipline, that's a better word, right? So if I don't tell them, I don't do what I tell them I'm going to do, there won't be any credibility in what I say, right? So that's important first. Second is, you need to be consistent in what you say. You don't have to be consistently wrong, but you have to be consistent in what you say, right? If you're not consistent in what you say, then again, people don't know what to think of you. Well, sometimes Kamal is, I can trust him. Sometimes I cannot trust him. Well, that's not building credibility, right? You don't want to be there. And third, remember, just as Rome was not built in a day, neither is credibility. It takes time. It takes time. When you want to be consistent in everything you say, in everything you do, you build upon the credibility. And then the second way to establish credibility is communication. And as Dan Oswald says, communication must be hot, honest, open, and two ways. When your communication is honest, open, two ways, and consistent, then you can establish your credibility. The last point here is let the bad news come from the horse's mouth. Andy Stanley, one of the coaches of a basketball coach of a young team, once had this problem. He had a meeting with all the parents of his young players, and he did not do very well in that meeting. And when he did not do very well, he comes back to his office and he starts thinking, my boss will never know about this. So I probably don't need to do anything about this. But then as he started thinking about integrity and establishing credibility with his boss, he said, let me go to my boss and tell him what went wrong today. So he goes to his boss and he tells him exactly everything. This is what I messed up with. He became the bearer of bad news. You know what happened because of that? The confidence that his boss had in him could never be taken away, because his boss knew that if something goes wrong, he will always come and talk to me. So Andy Stanley teaches this lesson to us. He says, let the bad news come from the horse's mouth. If there is bad news, don't sweep it under the rug. Go say it the way it is. Be brave about it. Be courageous about it. Okay. So that's how you will build trust. So integrity, when you act with integrity, you will gain credibility. When you have credibility, people will trust you. And when people will trust you, you can influence them to do something. And what happens when you influence people? That is leadership. Okay, so it starts from integrity. When you are showing integrity, working with integrity consistently, that builds your credibility. And when you are working credibility, when you have your credibility, people trust you. You don't trust somebody who is fake news, right? But if you have credibility, then you trust. And when you trust, that is the person who can influence you, and you can influence if you're that person. And we already talked about it. Influence is leadership. So without integrity, no credibility. Without credibility, no trust. No trust, no influence. No influence, no leadership. Okay? All comes down to this. You have to be a person of character. Three things: contrite enough to accept responsibility. The meaning of the word contrite is humble. Humble enough to accept responsibility. I said earlier, people do blame storming. So here we're going to talk about, or I'm going to tell you, don't resort to blame storming. Okay? Accept responsibility. Courageous enough to do the right thing, and confident enough to pay the price. That's character. And that's what integrity is all about. I want to take a break here and ask you guys if you have any questions. And I want to make sure I'm on time, because otherwise I'll keep talking and won't stop. So any questions so far?
Do you have any comments about, or directing comments specifically to lawyers with respect to not blame storming and having integrity, where part of your duty as a lawyer is to represent your client and protect your client, and sort of, you don't want to get into accepting responsibility to the point where you're creating a liability issue, but at the same time you want your client to be respected by the other party. You want to have integrity yourself. So how would you recommend or advise lawyers to grapple with the issue between confidentiality and sort of your duty as an attorney versus having that integrity?
Excellent question. And I guess you're studying law. So yeah, it doesn't matter, right? So it's a great question, great question. So what we are talking about is having that integrity of character yourself, right? So I would put it this way. I want to separate it this way. As a professional, let's say if I'm a lawyer, okay? I mess up something, But because I'm a lawyer, the first thing I want to do is I want to try and find the loopholes and see how can I get away from this and not accept responsibility as a lawyer. Because my profession as a lawyer is to serve the customer, serve my customers, right? So I want to do that rightly. So that's where I would say being humble enough to accept responsibility. Okay. Now coming to your clients, where and accepting responsibility, you're not going to accept responsibility on their behalf, right? You don't want to go and accept their responsibility on their behalf. What you want to do is, that's where you go back to your negotiables and non-negotiables. And let's say even as a lawyer, you have decided you are not going to represent anybody who is doing something not right, let's say. Okay. So if you come across something and you know that your client is done something which is not right, and if it's your value that you don't want to represent this person, you can probably walk away from that. So you're not telling your client, go, you need to accept responsibility, right? This is something which is internal, not external in that sense. It is internal to me, if that makes sense. And when it comes to, again, how you serve justice is this. Let's say your client has had made an error or something has happened, doesn't want to accept responsibility on this. You want to think about it, like what is your role in this? What is your role in, why are you being an attorney here? Why are you being a lawyer here? What's your role here? Okay. And then you decide what you want to do, what you don't want to do. And if it so happens that your client is saying, no, I can't, I'm not you, I wanted to lie about this, I wanted to somehow turn this around, get two false witnesses and get me out, and if that's not what your values are, you're going to say, no, I'm not going to do that, right? So that's the way I look at it, two ways. One is look internally and say, what should I be doing? What's my responsibility in all these things? And when it comes to your client, then you start thinking about what's the right thing to do here. Okay. And that doesn't mean that you go in and accept responsibility. Obviously, the first thing that a lawyer does is when he responds to a case is deny, 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 deny. He doesn't know about it any time. He then goes in and he looks at everything and says, okay, here's what it looks like. And then I take a decision. What do I want to do? Because it's about me as a leader, not about my client as a leader, right? And then you take a decision, and hopefully the client says, if he sees something is wrong, he says, I'm going to pay the price for this. And if nothing is wrong, it's the client who's going to come and say. And then based on whatever the truth is, it's up to me. What's my level of integrity? What am I getting if I'm supporting this client? I know he's wrong. I know let's say, extreme example, I know he committed a murder. What am I going to do about this? Am I okay representing him? Or is it that I have decided, if I know that there is something which is not my value, I'm not going to do it? So does that answer your question? I hope it was clear.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. Excellent. Any other questions before we go ahead?
We have a couple questions.
Yeah.
We have a couple questions in the chat.
Okay.
Two of them are similar. How do you deal with someone in your professional place who has no integrity?
Okay, so that's a good question also. Okay, here's my chat. Okay. I didn't know how to work this out first. Okay. How do you deal with a person who doesn't show integrity in the workplace, right? That's the question?
Yes.
Okay. So again, I think the answer is on the similar lines. It is about you. It's not about the other person at this time. So when we are looking at it as influencers and as leaders, I have to set the ground rules as a leader. Okay. I'm the one who's going to lead by example, and we're going to talk about it a little bit more. And if you see someone is not following the rules, or not the rules exactly, but not acting with integrity, here's what you want to do. You want to, again, reflect it back on yourself and say, am I okay with this? And your answer based on your values may be, no, I'm not okay with this. So I'm going to do what's the right thing to do. So the difference is, it's basically simple. And I'm oversimplifying it maybe, and it may be complex, but here is how I would oversimplify this or simplify this and say this. This is my basic ground rule. My basic ground rule is, I want to do the right thing, not the easy thing. That's it, simple. And because I'm doing the right thing, do I have the confidence enough in myself to pay the price? It's okay if I have to pay the price. I'm going to do the right thing. Do I have the courage to do the right thing? That's why I said it's important. If somebody else is not doing, we call them out, right? We call them out. But again, it depends. It will vary from situation to situation. And it's not about what the other people are doing. It's what I am doing. And I may not be in a position. I may just be a worker, and I may have 10 people above me, but that doesn't matter. I'm going to lead by example, and I'll make sure that I do what is right. So that's my question. That's my response. Does it make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
And then there's one other question. Will this work with any business and in any environment and society?
I would say absolutely yes, it would, and it should. Does it work? Probably not always, because people don't know this, and not everybody has taken my class. But in all seriousness, yes, it should. It is, because it's you. You are the one who's leading this. It's not the society who leads this. If you let the society or your profession lead it, it won't happen. We have to lead it. I have to lead it. I have to be the person of influence. I have to be the one who has to work with integrity. And when I do that, and when I model that behavior, people will change in my area. And if they don't change, I will change the way. I'll go to some other place where it is accepted. So that's the way I put it. Okay. Anything else? All right, let's go ahead. I'll just take some water if you don't mind without closing my camera. Are you guys enjoying this? Are you learning from this here? I sure hope so. All right, let's go. As I told you, the first one would take a long time, because this is the basic fundamental. If we don't get this right, you can't nurture people, you can't have faith in people, it just won't work, right? So that's the first one. Okay, the second one, I was for integrity, N is for nurturing, nurture people. This is really simple. You need to really help people grow. And I can tell you this in just one word, and that is simply this. You need to have a father's heart. If you want to nurture people, you want to have a father's heart. What do I mean by having a father's heart? It's simply this. When a child does well and does even better than the father, what's the state of a father's heart? What does the father do? He rejoices. He's happy when he sees his child succeed. In fact, he will go out of the way to make sure his child succeeds, right? That is a heart of a true leader who influences. He nurtures his people. He has a father's heart. He helps them to succeed. And said, your height of influence depends on the depth of your concern. Your height of influence depends on the depth of your concern. If you don't have concern for the person, you can't have any influence on them. And how do you show concern? When you nurture them and you help them grow, okay? Because people do not care how much you know until they know how much you care. You might have heard of this before. People do not care how much you know until they know how much you care, okay? Very often people say, and when it comes to nurturing, I have an open door policy. My people can come to me anytime and ask me anything. I will help them. You know what? Get rid of that open door policy, because open door policy means this. You are sitting in your high chair and waiting for people to come to you. I say this. Get rid of that policy. You cannot be sitting in your office and saying, my door is open, walk in if you want to. If you're a real nurturer, you walk out of that door and go to where your people are, and there's where you go and talk to them. You find them and you nurture them and you help them grow. Okay, so that's the difference, I said. Okay, I'm going to talk about this real quick because I know we are running out of time here quite a bit, but I'll talk about this real quick here. So there's another story of a guy. This happened in Las Vegas. It happens only in Las Vegas, right? Yeah, but this is a good story. But Wynn Resorts over there, Wynn Resorts is one of the beautiful resorts out there in Las Vegas. I have not been there, but yeah, I know about it. Steve Wynn, who's the founder and CEO of Wynn Resorts, he tells us the story of how the culture is in his company, how he nurtures people, and how everybody, even the bellboy, has learned to nurture others. And this will again show you that you don't have to be at a position to get to show yourself as a leader. You can be even a bellboy. So this bellboy, he checks in a couple who has driven all the way from LA and has come in there. I think it's over 7-8 hours of drive. So they come in, and as he's carrying the baggage to the room, the wife turns to the husband and says, "Oh my gosh, I forgot to get your insulin, and we'll have to just go back tomorrow morning." And she just says that, and this bellboy gets their address, and at night, he asks his brother, who lives in LA, to take the medicine from her house and drive all the way to Las Vegas to get the medicine by 7 o'clock in the morning so they don't have to leave. Did he have to do that? Not at all. Absolutely not. But what was the point here is he knew this is the training that they had got, the culture that was created in this company is to care for others, to be concerned for others. When he showed that concern, he was just going above and beyond what he was asked to do, right? I already talked about this, but I didn't tell you about Zig Ziglar. There are no traffic jams on the extra mile. When you show concern, there are no traffic jams on the extra mile. It doesn't take a lot to do that, really. It does take a lot, but it doesn't take a lot to do that sometimes, right? So what we're trying to tell you is simply this. Words the world today needs empathy. They need people who can be concerned. And if you want to be a great servant leader, the second thing, if you want to influence people, is you need to learn, and I need to learn, how do I help people? How do I nurture people? How do I help them grow? Okay. And we're going to see a few things. I'm going to show you all the 5 things here. So there are 5 things that which are the 5 pillars, what I call as 5 pillars of nurturer. So what does a nurturer do? The first of all is it's all about love. There was a clergyman called John Knox, almost 400 years back. He said this: you cannot antagonize and influence at the same time. How right is he? You cannot antagonize and influence a person at the same time. You need to show that love. You need to help the person by showing love and by showing that you really care for that person. Okay. And then it has said love will always find a way. Indifference will find an excuse. Love finds a way. Indifference finds an excuse. So when somebody comes and tells you, "Hey, I need this help," what's your response? Is your response, "I'll find a way to help this person," or is your response, "I have an excuse"? That decides, right? So to be a good nurturer, you do that. The second is respect. They respect the other person. And I'll tell you a simple story of a woman who went to this small town, living in this small town, coming from a big city, goes to this small town to live, and goes to the only pharmacy place that is there in that little town. And she goes in there and she doesn't like it because the guy doesn't seem to be responding to her. And so she comes back, she tells her neighbor how bad this place is and how bad this pharmacy is, and tells him all about the bad things that are happening. But as I said, this was the only game in town. So next time she has to go back to this pharmacy store, and she's surprised and shocked. The owner comes out, he just is thanking her. He's been very, very good to her, and he's really going out of the way to help her be comfortable. Surprised, she comes back and she tells the neighbor, "Did you talk to this guy anything? Because I see such a big difference in him. I'm sure because of all that you told him, this guy is good now." And the guy responds, he says, "Yeah, I did. I actually told him how grateful you were for him and all the good things. And it's just when he knew that you respected him so much and you understood what he's going through, he just did what was right." So you see, this small story is showing us When people feel respected, they will do anything for you. They will do, they will be, you will get credibility in their eyes, right? The third thing is here is sense of security. We have to create in our workplaces, in personal life, professional life, we have to create an environment of security where it's okay to fail, where it's okay to say things, it's okay to try something and not succeed in that. It's okay to do that. When you start creating that kind of environment in your workplaces, in your homes, in everywhere you go, among your friends, it's okay for your friends to say things which just to say it's okay. They should have that sense of security, right? And then the fourth thing is recognition. There's a story of this man who has this old mule, and he blindfolds this mule when this mule has to work, and he would tell him, come on, Jack, do this. And then he would say, come on, Jill, do this. Come on, Murphy, do this. So a passerby looks at this and he turns to this man and says, excuse me, sir, you have only one mule. What's his name or her name? You have called him within a minute, Jack, Jill, Murphy, and whatnot. He just smiles. He says, you know what? He's blindfolded. He doesn't know. He has blinders on. He doesn't know. He thinks that when I call him so many names, he thinks that he's working in a team. There's a Jack, there's a Jill, there's a Murphy, and that just helps his attitude. Well, you know what? When people are recognized, when they know that they're in a team, their attitude changes. So they're not the only one doing that. When they recognize that they're not the only ones doing that, there's a sense of unity. There's a sense of attitude change, right? So that's what a nurturer does. He changes the attitude. He shows them recognition to each person. And the last thing which you would know is encouragement. Actually, this is a really great quote, and I want to read this for you. William Watt says this: flatter me, and I may not believe you. Criticize me, and I may not like you. Ignore me, and I may not forgive you. Encourage me, and I will not forget you. Encouragement is a big deal. It's a big thing. When we start encouraging people, we'll see when we want to nurture somebody, we start showing them encouragement, right? And there is a B, C, D, E, F, 6 ways we start encouraging them. We become accessible to them, first of all, okay? When you want to nurture somebody, and this is something I learned from my own son, actually. He would come to me and he would tell me, Dad, I need your help with this geometry. And I'm like, I left it for choice when I was growing. I can't do this, but I have to be accessible to him. In fact, yesterday night I was up, I was doing this, was going through my notes that I'm going to do today. And he said, Dad, I have a project. I need your help in consumer math. It's a long project. And I had no mood to do it, but I did. I sat with him. I had to be accessible to him. And the other thing I do is simple things, I used to drop my younger son to school every day because of the timing of the school and my work. And we used to talk about something every day. And I always talked about focus on this, focus on that. So one day I was just talking to him and I said, we have been talking every day about something. What is one thing you have learned from me? And his answer was immediately, focus. When you nurture somebody, when you talk to them, you explain to them, that's how they will come up. They'll grow in that. And the second way you do the B of that is believing in them. You don't believe in them after they succeed, but you believe in them before they succeed, right? We're going to talk about it a little bit if we get the time, but that's important. And then you commit yourself to them, help them to grow in their opportunities, and get them to do a higher thing, get them to challenge them to a bigger thing. And when you do all these things, it's not an exchange. Remember, this is not an exchange. You're just doing it for them, right? In short, there are 3 things you want to do with them. You want to give them a sense of perspective, okay? When you want to nurture somebody, you want to give them a sense of perspective. The second thing you want to do is you want to give them a sense of significance. Woody Allen once said, my only regret is that I'm not somebody else. But it was said as a joke for him, but it really makes such a deep point. When you give a person a sense of significance of who they are, So first, you give them a sense of perspective. Second, you give them a sense of significance. And third, give them hope. These are the three things you can do to nurture somebody.